Thank you so much to all of my patrons. I super appreciate the continued support. Hey everybody, this is Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, and today I'm going to be doing my 2023 update for my favorite fantasy series of all time. I did one right about exactly a year ago, and I've read like 130 books since then, and I have a lot of changes in my top 10, and I thought it'd be a good time to go over them. If you want to talk about what I have to say here or share your own, put it down in the comments, or better, come join my Discord channel. There's a link down below. I'd love to talk to you about them. There's 700 plus people all talking about fantasy, and in general, it's just a good time to talk about your favorite books. So let's start with number 10, and number 10 is The Greenbone Saga. This is by Fonda Lee. This is a completed trilogy that was just completed, I believe, last year, and this one really caught me by surprise because I normally don't like urban fantasies, which is what this one is, but this just rocks. I think this could be best summarized as like Asian fantasy Godfather, and it's just so good. Now, I'm a sucker for mafia type books, and I've never read a fantasy mafia book before, and it works to perfection. Now, it does feel very, very Godfather, like really borrows some scenes from it right at the beginning of the series, but then it quickly diverges and goes into its own thing, and it's so much better because of that. I gave all three of these books 5 out of 5 stars, but I would say that the second and third books are better quality and like top tier 5 stars for me. I also love that this series does this wonderful thing that I wish more fantasy series would do, where it does these massive time jumps, especially in that last book, where it'll go to like multiple generations and really give this more epic feel to this story. I find a lot of stories can get a little constrained when they're talking about events that all take place in like a couple months, and it just feels a little unreal. This one's not that. Now, the fantasy elements in this series are rather light. I mean, you could rip out all the fantasy elements of this, and the series would not lose any quality because of it. The story's just extremely well done. The writing's great. The characters are so fleshed out. I'll never forget some of these characters here, and they'll go down as some of my favorite characters of all time. Just purely a wonderful series, and there's a reason that the series is so beloved. I mean, in the last version of the Reddit thread for the best fantasy series of all time, I believe this series had the biggest rise from the one that was done 2 years ago, and I suspect that this is going to continue to rise and really go down in people's hearts as an all-time great in the genre. The next on this list is The Wandering Inn. Now, you could probably watch, dozens of these videos by different booktubers, and I'm probably the only one that is going to tell you that this is a top 10 favorite series. I'm just addicted to it. It's so good. So it's written by this author, Pirate Abba, who wants to remain anonymous, and I totally respect that. And this is a web serial that is now being converted into books, after the web serial has been going on for a long time. This web serial is the longest fantasy series of all time, and it's like 3 or 4 times the size of the entire Wheel of Time. As the filming, it's about 40,000 pages, and that's insane. I mean, that is more than most people could read on a good year, just for one series. And it's not just done. It expands at this crazy rapid pace. The author writes, most of the year, weeks of the year, I think like 40 or so weeks out of the year, and puts out 2 very large chapters every week. Now, this is a lit RPG. Now, if you don't know what that is, think like video game, Dungeons and Dragons in a book form, like where characters are quite literally leveling up. They have different classes, different powers that they're getting as they're getting up levels, but it feels very perfect for the story. Like, it doesn't feel like a gimmick. It really works, and it makes you really addicted to the story. At least it is for me. If you're into video games or RPGs in particular, this is a wonderful series to jump into. Now, the first book is a little bit rough in the writing quality. It jumps up dramatically, but it is addicting. I mean, I have had many people tell me that have watched my reviews of this series, that have commented down the line in other videos saying, "Hey, Matt, thank you so much for recommending Wandering Inn to me. I've read the entire thing now." Or I'm 8 books in. So I think there's like 7 or 8 books out. The author releases 2 a year, but it's kind of dependent on how quickly the audiobook narrator can pump them out. 2 a year is how much they come out. So you can catch up to the books, but you can also just get them for free on the website. And I would recommend trying out the first book for free. There's nothing to lose. Number 8 is a series that everybody's heard of, and this is A Song of Ice and Fire, or Game of Thrones for the people that watch the show. This is written by George R.R. Martin. This is an uncompleted series of 5 out of 7 books, famously uncompleted because I don't know if the 6th book's ever coming out, and I'm quite certain the 7th one is never coming out. People are waiting a really long time here. But this series will always go down in my heart as one of the titans of this genre. It's what got me back into fantasy after a very long hiatus, and I just love it. And now it's very similar to the show. So if you've watched the show and you're holding off on reading these books, it is similar, but it's very different as well. It's much more deep, especially as it goes further along in the series. There's so many storylines in the books that are not carried over to the show, and it makes sense. The show only could do so much, but where I found that the show kind of started to falter a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean a lot, as the series went along, the books don't do that as much. Now, the first 3 books are unquestionably, for me at least, better than the next 2 books, but those next 2 books are really good as well. Now, I don't believe that the series is ever going to get finished. So for those people that are watching this that are like, yeah, I don't really want to read this because it's going to be an unfinished series, I would plead with you to rethink that stance. I mean, there is a reason that so many people mark this as one of their favorite series. There's so many reasons that people say that the 3rd book in particular is one of the greatest fantasy works of all time. And they don't say that with this condition on it that says, yeah, but I'm going to change my mind if the book's never finished. No, they say it because of what it is now. So just bite the bullet, check these out. There's a reason that these are so famous, and it's not just because of the show. It's because the books are downright incredible on their own right, and you deserve to reward yourself with reading these things if you haven't yet. Number 7 is a series that is the most unpopular out of any here, and I believe it's the most underrated fantasy series of all time. And this is The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee, a fellow fantasy YouTuber. Not just fantasy, he does a lot of books, but he really likes fantasy. This is a completed trilogy that got finished last year, and this is crazy good. And it's a dark, grim, dark fantasy where it's brutal. The themes are very, very depressing and dark, but there is light at the end of the tunnel here. And so, if you like a darker book and a darker series, yeah, you got to check this one out. This series does so many good things. It's got this old school fantasy influence to it. The author very, very famously has mentioned, I don't know if famously, but he's very open about people like Tad Williams, and these older works really influenced him into writing this. And you can see that as it comes through. But it also blends these newer type of tropes that work really well. The twists are wonderfully well done. The battle sequences are incredible, and especially the large kind of set-piece battle in the 2nd and 3rd books, I will never forget. They're just extremely well done. For an author who's never come out with books before, this is an amazing accomplishment. And particularly, the one thing that I want to say about this series is it handles religion in such an amazing way, better than any other series that I've ever read, in that it kind of mimics how a lot of religions started in the world, where it started as one religion, and then there was this major event that split them, and now these while they may believe some things, but they have massive differences because of the way some followers went and abandoned the church and did these other things, and now they're fighting each other. And you're constantly going through this book questioning about which side has it right. Does anybody have it right? And as you learn more and uncover more of the mysteries of this book, you just constantly are changing your opinion, and I just love it to bits. So number 6 is a series the only series here that I am not caught up on, except for The Wandering Inn. I'll never catch up there. But this is The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. This is a completed series of 4 books. The last one was completed rather recently, and this is a historical type of book where it's mimicking the Three Kingdoms period. I think that's the name of it, in ancient China, particularly the Han Dynasty. Now, I don't know much of anything about the Han Dynasty, so I was left with a lot of surprise here and not really knowing any of the events that would take place. But the first book here is really like a prelude to the rest of the books, in that it's like a quick history of the world. And it reads kind of like a history book, but a super action-packed one. I think it's the second best book that I've ever read. The first is going to show up at the end of this video because it's my number 1 favorite series. I'll talk about that later. But It's just amazing. It works so well for me. Now, I love kind of history type books, and I think a lot of fantasy fans do, especially historical fiction, which very much this is in that realm, although there's heavy fantasy elements to this. But it's just, it quickly jumps from event to event. And even though you are getting good character development here, it's like, I mentioned this in my review, but, in most books, they'll say, okay, we're going to go to this battle, and here's our plan. They would spend a chapter or so going over the plan. They would spend several chapters, slowly enacting the plan, and then it would really hit in, 4 or 5 chapters in. This book does not do that. This book will say, here's the plan, and then you flip the page, and they go, okay, plan into action. You flip the page. Okay, on to the next thing. The pace is crazy fast, and it's so fun to be able to read a book like that when almost every book out there doesn't do anything of the sort, so it feels very different. The second book then goes into the story that is going to be told kind of throughout. Totally changes the pace, slows things down, does a lot of character development, brings in new characters, and I just adore it to pieces. And if the final 2 books that I have not read yet are of the quality of the first 2, this is going to shoot way up. Might be my favorite series of all time. We'll see. Number 5 is Stormlight Archive. This is by the one and only Brandon Sanderson, and this is an uncompleted series, although unlike George R.R. Martin, I have every faith in the world that the series will finish, because this man is a machine. He has finished 4 books of the 10. They come out every few years, and the series should finish in 20 years or so. It's a long time, but these books are wonderful, and there's a reason that these books are unquestionably the most popular fantasy series out right now. Every single crowdsourced type of list will list this one as number 1 for a number of reasons. First, they're really good, but more importantly, they're really accessible to everybody. If you're just getting into fantasy, this is a great way to get into it because it's not written terribly complex, which is a bad thing in some ways, but a really good thing for bringing new readers in. But if you're already a veteran to fantasy, there's also a lot to appreciate here as well. The world building is top notch. The magic system is wonderful. And the plot is great. Now, Brandon Sanderson does this thing, the opposite of somebody like a George R.R. Martin, where he plans everything out to amazing detail. He knows everything that's going to happen in every single one of these books, at least the major points. And what's beautiful about that is it makes it so these payoffs are huge. These huge twists can happen that feel extremely well earned and well set up from the previous books. And it just makes it so incredible, unlike anything that I've ever read. I don't often get emotional in the reads that I go through. Now, I'm going to sound hypocritical because the next series I'm going to talk about, I cried like a baby. But I often, when a lot of people say oh, I was crying, oh, I was, standing up cheering, I'm not that kind of person. This series made me teary-eyed in every single one of these books, not just because of bad things that were happening, but the good things, these redemption moments, these really good versus evil moments where good triumphs really got to me. And the series just is amazing. And yeah, there's a reason that everyone loves this thing. Number 4 is Realm of the Elderlings. This is by Robin Hobb. This is a completed 16-book series that, again, finished rather recently. This is a 5 different sub-series here. Most of them are trilogies, but one of them is a 4-book quartet, and mostly they follow the life of 𝐿𝐵𝐶𝐷𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴 Farseer. This is a character where in the first book starts off as a very little boy, and by the end of the last book is an older man. And watching this character and being able to go through life with this character will, at least for me, attaches me to this character unlike any that I've ever met. It's my favorite character of all time, and it's not that close. And when I finished, I was sad because I wanted to continue going through life with this character. Now I can do a reread, I will. But it's amazing to have these moments. This series is famous for a couple major things. One of them is that the character work is unquestionably, for me, the best character work in any fantasy novel. And the other is these horribly sad moments. Now, this book is not without hope. It's not a grimdark book because the characters keep trying to rise up and learn to deal with trauma. But there's these really sad moments in the series that really got to me. I will always cherish the writing here, and I think Robin Hobb is the best writer in terms of quality out of anybody on this entire list. and I'm just really obsessed with what she writes, and I can't wait to go back and read some of her earlier works, because I have no doubt that I'm going to fall in love with those as well. Number 3 is The Banished Lands by John Gwynne. These are 2 series that I think a lot of people have not read the second one, so they don't say The Banished Lands. What they'll say is Faithful and the Fallen. Faithful and the Fallen is a 4-book quartet, followed by a trilogy of Blood and Bone. Now, a lot of people think they're separate because there's like 150 or so year gap between the first series and the second, but it's in the same world dealing with similar events, so I'm going to include them as one. This is a series, again, where John Gwynne wrote this, his first time writing anything, which is crazy to me that he's able to bump this thing out. It's just this classic kind of fantasy tale of multi-POV, and, you know, this kind of journey quest to save the world. You've read things like this before. You'll probably read things like this in the future, but this is masterfully done. The battle sequences here are second to none. I don't think anybody can write a battle sequence like John Gwynne. He just gets you into the moment. You feel like you're there with the characters. You're scared. You're stressed. It's wonderfully well done. The religion aspects here, a little bit similar to the 5 Warrior Angels earlier, are very well done. They're constantly twisting and turning as you're unraveling more things. There's an amazing character in this series that starts off as this super bit part character, and by the end is one of the major characters. I love that. I wish more series would go about doing that. There's these amazing animal companions in this that can communicate with people in very like humorous and awesome. I love a good animal companion, and there's multiple here, different races, very large world, very well built out, just an awesome series. In the final book of the first series of The Faithful and the Fallen is one of my top like 10, closer to 5 than 10 of all time for me. Number 2 is The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. This is a completed series of 10 books. I'm hoping that he adds more, but as of now, it's completed. This is 2 trilogies, 3 standalones, and a short story collection. He's called Lord Grimdark, I think people call him, although I think he takes exception to that because he doesn't think it's grimdark, but it is. At least my definition of it, where there's not a lot of hope in the world. There's so much gray, if not dark, and a lot of people doing bad things to each other. And he's such a good writer. His character writing is, for me, second only to Robin Hobb. But the plots and the way that it just comes out on paper is so good. I love a dark story, and this is my favorite dark story of all time. Maybe that says something about me. But if you're into really dark stories, then I don't know why you haven't checked this one out yet. It's just so perfect in virtually every way. Now, I don't love the standalones as much as I do like the 2 trilogies, but those trilogies, not only do they get better and better throughout, but the final book in each of the trilogies just knocked me sideways. I did not see the direction they were going. I maybe should have, but just such a perfect way to end cap both of these trilogies. It just really wonderful. One thing I will also say about this series is that you would really benefit by listening to this on an audiobook more than any other series here. It's just perfectly done. The audiobook narrator brings everything to life. You really should just never read this in physical format. Just skip straight to audio. And if you don't have like an audiobook account or an Audible account, use my promo code, audibletrial.com/Matt, and get yourself a free audiobook and check out The First Law. It's awesome. Now, I recognize that, and people have said this, but like, you can also get a free trial for Audible. You don't have to use my promo code, but it helps me out. So might as well plug myself while I'm doing this. And let's then go to number 1. And if you know my videos and you've watched my channel, you know what this is already. And that's right, it's Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. Unquestionably my number 1 favorite series of all time. This is a completed series of 10 books. There are other books in this universe, but I'm going to focus here on these 10 books because they are my favorite. The series is so complex. It's amazingly written. When I said that I think Robin Hobb is the best writer, I forgot that I was yet to go to my favorite author, and the best writer, in my opinion, is Steven Erikson. He writes somehow these dark stories with this amazing light involved in them, these incredible themes of like compassion. He's got this deep philosophical outlook that just bleeds into these, but it's not like self-indulgent. The world is just enormous in a good way. There's many continents here that you get to travel to and find out about these different like cultures. Everywhere feels just like living and breathing. Like I said, it's so complex in that you'll never be able to really understand everything on your first go round or maybe your second go round. But I love that. He doesn't hold your hand. He just dumps you straight in and says, this is the story I'm going to tell. You're going to deal with it. And trust me, it's going to be awesome. It is. Now, it's not for everybody. You have to work through this book. It's not easy. I did do a video, click above to check this one out, and that does a full overview of Malazan, and it gives a lot of tips for how to read this series and understand it a lot better, and it'll guaranteed improve your enjoyment out of this. So if you're feeling a little hesitant to read Malazan and you feel like overwhelmed, check that video out. It should chill things out a little bit and make your enjoyment all the better. And I suspect that this series is going to be my favorite forever, but hopefully something knocks it out. Maybe the Dandelion Dynasty will. I hope it does. So those are my 10. Appreciate you sticking here through this. If you want to talk about this, join the comments down below, or better yet, join the Discord channel and we can talk about it in real time. So thank you so much. I appreciate you sticking through. And as always, happy reading to you. Want to give a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Anna, Ben, Brian, CJ, Danu, Darren, Jamie, Maria, Michael Sugarman, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Romeo Mike, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sky, and Zion.